groups that could potentially, create a system like this. And I think the Knights Templar are one of those. And I think the pirates and their theories are probably a little bit more relevant because they have a huge amount of manpower behind them as well.
Yeah. So to your point, there are definitely some thoughts and theories around pirates. So one of the main names that I saw is a guy named Captain Kidd. He was a pirate from Scotland that lived in the 1600s. And basically he allegedly came over and buried all of his pirate booty in in Oak Island.
Bury that booty.
And this Captain Kidd was actually a really popular pirate, very well known. He's been written about quite a bit. Poe, Washington Irving, Robert Louis Stevenson mentions him in Treasure Island. So I mean, he's a very prominent guy. He allegedly hid all of his treasure here in Oak Island, and he was known to hide treasure. Some of it has been found outside of Oak Island, so it's very plausible, I guess, that he would hide it.
Yeah, and allegedly there was one of his crew members or somebody that was had very intimate knowledge of his operation or something on their deathbed said that part of his treasure or his treasure was hidden on Oak Island as well. But again, I wasn't there, so I can't substantiate that claim. But that's one of those folklore stories as well.
There's a lot of those around this place.
Yeah, which is cool, right? I mean, you don't really get a lot of undiscovered or mysterious places anymore that can't be explained or that have been explained over the years and just sort of died off in their storytelling. And Oak Island is one of those places that still nobody has any idea what the heck is going on or what the history of it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, the human tendency is to want to explore and discover things, and we've pretty much done that on most of the earth. So
it's the last bastion of our treasure hunting childhood, right? I mean, there's not even many treasures anymore. The treasures existed, right? Everybody's found them already, so it's no fun anymore. Oak Island is I
think that's why it's captivated so many people. But
absolutely,
I would say that we don't know that there's any treasure there. There's barely been anything found.
Have faith, Pasta. Have faith.
But you talked about booby traps. You want to tell a little bit more about what you think those booby traps are guarding the treasure?
Well, so I think I know I don't know, but from my research I will say most of my knowledge comes from a recent show over the last few years on the History Channel called The Curse of Oak Island, and they are not a sponsor. It's a show on the History Channel, and it's basically two brothers who are fucking rich, seemingly, because it seems like they bought part of the island or all of the island or part of the island that they want to dig on, but they basically found this story of Oak Island back in Reader's Digest. I think it's 50 years this year. And ever since then, they sort of, worked and saved their money and saved their tokens and bought a chunk of Oak Island and started basically digging on it to try to prove exactly what we're talking about right now. So most of my knowledge, whether that's scientific knowledge or not, comes from the History Channel watching this show. Rick and Marty Legina. That's vagina spelled with an L.
They pronounce it Legina.
Oh.
But I also think...
Okay, well...
I also think Legina as well.
Yeah. Legina. For those of you that are trying to look it up online, it's Legina. It's vagina spelled with an L.
Correct.
But so the show basically takes you through them basically renting. It seems like they're buying construction companies at this point. Like they just keep bringing in these gigantic earth moving tools and keep digging in these holes. They try to. Their big thing is digging down into 10X. But the problem was they kept digging down into 10X and digging down into 10X. And part of what we stopped explaining before or forgot to explain was that the money pit, eventually all of these people were digging in this stuff and basically everything collapsed. So there was no the newer age folks that are digging for this treasure have to come in and basically try to find where all of these stories took place and where they found the old stuff and things like that. So 10X is one of those places, which is what 10X is basically one of the major holes that were dug, 150, 200 feet down, basically from the start of all this.
10X is the other hole that we mentioned, the other excavation site that was down to 235 feet where they did the cameras and allegedly saw chests and bones and tools and stuff.
Yeah, some dead guys. And the Legina brothers, they basically rent this equipment, be able to dig down 235 feet like they did back in the day. And they're trying to recreate all of these old folklore stories and see if they can actually, with newer technology, go down and see what these people saw back in the day, whether it be the chest or the dead bodies or whatever it was. But the problem is that
they haven't found anything. That's the problem. They found nothing.
Well, the problem is, keep your imagination open, Adam. They have, as they're digging, the hole keeps filling up, much like the stories back in the 1800s and the 1900s said they would. What the theory is that there is a very advanced system of tunnels that basically pull salt water from the ocean into these holes, and once you reach a certain depth, it obviously opens up the hole of the tunnel to enable the water to flow into the hole. And the problem with that is it's pulling from the ocean. And again, I'm not a scientist or a historian, but I do know that the ocean does not run out of water. So as you're pulling water into these tunnels, you're trying to obviously get it out at the same rate, and that's never going to work. So that's one of the booby traps. I don't know if that's actually considered a booby trap. In my Indiana Jones knowledge or the Goonies knowledge, a booby trap seems to try to injure you. So maybe that's not.
Yeah, like a fucking boulder coming at you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So and one other thing is, you talked a little bit about how people have died. And I don't know which specific group this came from, but there was a father and son team that were digging down into what I think what I can recall as 10X. I don't think it was the money pit, but they're digging down into one of these already existing holes, and they get inundated with a bunch of sulfur gas or methane gas or some gas that can potentially kill you. Well, it didn't potentially kill them, it did kill them. And there has been several accidents along the way as well, but that's not a booby trap, but there are several different instances of weird stuff happening to people on the island that sort of lends towards it being a little bit cursed as well. So not only is it booby trapped, it is also cursed.
The gases you're talking about are Restall and Dunfield in the middle of 1900s.
Yes.
One thing that we didn't mention that I think is pretty interesting, this hole, the main hole that was initially dug, that was initially coined as the money pit. That is the origin of that phrase, money pit. You'd use that term today as, usually like in reference to a house or something that you just keep throwing money at and it just sucks all your money up. That's essentially what the money pit is on Oak Island. People have spent millions and millions and millions of dollars trying to find treasure there, and it hasn't happened, but that is where the term came from as far as we can tell.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know how people back in the 1800s or 1900s did it, because I'm watching these two Fakakta brothers bring in all of this big ass equipment that I've never even seen before, and they are literally spending millions and millions of dollars. And it literally, I mean, each episode sort of ends with, do we still have enough money to continue this shit? Basically.
Yes.
So the money pit is very, I keep watching to try to give them the few pennies that they get from my advertising dollars, so I can continue to watch. But it just seems like there's enough, you would hope that these people aren't doing this out of the goodness of their heart, that they find, or they have enough evidence to continue this, or else it's just, there's no payoff and they're just wasting millions of dollars to dig a big giant fucking hole, which I could have done for half the price.
Exactly. Two other kind of interesting things that I want to make sure we at least touch on is, there's been lots of groups that have spent time on Oak Island trying to find treasure and digging. One group included President FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was very interested and invested in this kind of lore around Oak Island. He followed it essentially all his life, even through his presidency. And, there's old pictures of him on Oak Island with a crew. So, I mean, there's lots of people, kind of said this about simulation theory, lots of smart people that believe that there is something to this. I think that's definitely something interesting to note.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even call it like a passing interest for FDR. His was almost an obsession because, like you said, he followed it throughout his presidency. He followed it throughout his life. I mean, you can look at the Oak Island picture when he's there with his lads, and he's not old. But he's in the prime of his life. So, I mean, by the time you reach the presidency, he's a little bit older, and this is spanning decades of his life, and he's dedicating resources, he's dedicating money to it as well. And again, some super smart people that have dedicated a lot of resources, whether it's time, thought, money, to trying to find whatever may be on Oak Island. And to me, that, again, is just super intriguing and super fun. Do you want to talk about a little bit of what other theories are?
Yeah, I mean, one of the other theories that I want to talk about, because I think it's interesting, is that we talked about what could be there. We talked about the Ark of the Covenant, Holy Grail. You talked about Marie Antoinette's jewels. One of the other things that I think is pretty interesting that for some reason people believe is there is evidence that someone else, specifically Sir Francis Bacon, is the author of Shakespeare's works. And this is very interesting. I'm not sure where this came from, but it's pretty out of left field, if you ask me.
Well, yeah, and Sir Francis Bacon, or I'm just going to call him Francis Bacon because I don't want to say Sir Francis Bacon
Why
every
not
time we
just
refer to
Sir
him.
Bacon?
Can we just call him Bacon? But so, I mean, Sir Francis Bacon, I think is, and again, I'm not a fucking historian, so don't tweet or Instagram how fucking stupid I am.
Please do.
But I guess he is a fairly well known, like he's sort of like a Renaissance man. He has engineering prowess. He is scientific prowess. He had a bunch of scientific writings that he had. But I think one of the things that you just talked about was he is it's a pretty big speculation that Francis Bacon wrote, or Sir Bacon wrote, a lot of, if not all of Shakespeare's manuscripts, and not only for Shakespeare, but he is, I guess, supposedly a pretty prolific writer for a lot of different figures during that time, sort of a ghostwriter for a lot of different people.
Yeah, and there's allegedly evidence that supports this and proves this, buried in Oak Island.
Yep, and then, I mean, one of the things that Mr. Bacon said before he died was that I'm going to be known for what I really am much longer after I die, or some shit like that. But it basically was lending to, hey, the true discovery of what I am, what I do, will be discovered long after
Mr. Bacon, Sir Bacon, was definitely an interesting guy. He, well, it's fun little side note. I did Google if our bacon that we eat today was named after him, and spoiler alert, it was not.
What was the nexus of bacon? The actual food.
It has origins in a German word that means buttock.
Interesting. Okay.
But anyway, Sir Bacon, he was basically, he developed something that became known as the Baconian method, which was the precursor for the scientific method. So, like you said, Renaissance guy, really important. Another thing that I thought was interesting is he coined the phrase "knowledge is power," which is pretty cool.
Yes. Now that we've talked about all these treasures, there is also a theory that it's not one treasure at Oak Island, that there are numerous treasures, and that there is such folklore. You know, if we go back from the 1300s, where the Templar, treasure basically starts, or the Templar theory basically starts, they had a treasure. So then, in theory, they're going back, or whatever. There's stories of this island that exists to the west, I think, right? Is that's how you get to Oak Island from Europe, right? To the west,
correct.
You go west.
Yes, we are to the west.
Okay,
of Europe.
great.
You are absolutely correct.
I'm really showing my knowledge is power in this episode, but
powerless.
So there, I mean, okay, thanks. So there is a theory which, again, just sort of blows your mind and makes you want to smile and be giddy and get a boat up to Oak Island right now, and that's that this might not have been just a one and off or one and done type situation for a treasure. Marie Antoinette's treasure may be there, or the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail may be there, or Viking treasure or pirates treasure may be there, or it might be all of them, or it could be something else that is just massive amounts of treasure. Pirates talk, right? There's probably pirates clubs that say, hey, how to avoid getting your treasure taken is to head up to this tiny little island in Nova Scotia and hide your treasure up there. And that may have been a dumping ground for a lot of different pirate treasures outside of just Captain Kidd.
Our producer wanted me to point out as well that she disagrees with your multiple pirate theory.
Okay, great. So just go ahead and light that shitbag on fire, kick it, and then run away and have no explanation for it. That's fine.
So let me ask you another question.
No. I'll explain myself.
Okay, go for it.
There's no honor system in piracy.
more than one pirate is not hiding their treasure in the same place and being like, yeah, this hole over here, this is mine. Don't touch my shit. And expecting people to go and steal it. Like there's no code here. There's no like locker with a